However, what Castleman failed to mention in his article and is probably not aware of are the specific consequences of elevating nitric oxide inside the body. It is absolutely essential that Viagra be understood from the perspective of its role as a nitric oxide agonist because it's the precise mechanism by which erection drugs are killing people. Viagra made nitric oxide famous as the erection chemical, but the list of side effects associated with it make the case for taking it soft. Short-term side effects include heart attacks and/or strokes. Chronically elevated nitric oxide long-term causes cardiovascular disease, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, and other types of neurodegenerative dementia. Furthermore, a recent study by scientists at Harvard showed a dramatic increase in the risk of skin cancer following Viagra use. After following up with over 25,000 men, Viagra uses were 84% more likely to develop melanoma, which is considered the most dangerous of skin cancers. There's one final, particularly abhorrent potential side effect of Viagra that I feel obligated to tell other men about. In fact, I'd probably grab a ladder and then climb up onto my rooftop and yell this one if I thought it would make a difference. The permanent erection, gangrene, impotence, and amputation. It can begin after taking a single dose of Viagra, just one dose, and after you're not fun, your erection won't go away for hours or sometimes even days. Sounds like a dream come true, right? Wrong. In some cases, victims have suffered painful erections for several hours and needed hospital treatment. If an erection lasts longer than 6 hours, it can restrict the blood supply to the intracavernous smooth muscle in the penis, which facilitates the erection process, causing permanent damage, according to Dr. Roger Kirby, a urologist at St. George Hospital, London. This condition of a prolonged erection is called priapism, which is precipitated by a disturbed blood supply departing from the penis to the point where the tissue suffocates and gangrene of the penis ensues. Penile gangrene is a serious condition in which skin painfully swells and forms blisters that may rupture. Even pus may make an appearance during an episode of penile gangrene. An article in Independent recounts the ghastly experience of a Colombian man who took Viagra to try and impress his girlfriend. The 66-year-old Gentil Ramirez Polania popped the erection drug before his big date, and after the party, his erection would not go away. In fact, it lasted several days. When Polania finally went to the hospital complaining of pain, doctors found his penis to be inflamed, fractured, and showing signs of gangrene. In an effort to stop the gangrene from spreading to the rest of the man's body, doctors said they had no option but to remove the man's penis, the article reports. Nitric oxide and vasodilation. One of the alleged benefits peddled by proponents of nitric oxide is its vasodilatory effects, meaning it relaxes the inner muscles of the blood vessels, increasing the circulation of blood to tissues of the body that need it. This is the main argument for the theory that nitric oxide supplements are beneficial for the body. However, there is an interesting paradox involved with the phenomenon. In small amounts, the vasodilatory effects of nitric oxide can indeed be beneficial, but what most proponents of nitric oxide supplementation don't realize is that in excess it can be causative of a whole host of disorders and pathologies. If you think of the body mechanically like a car, which most scientists tend to do, anything that can increase blood vessel dilation will be seen as a good thing. Their thought process goes something like, in cardiovascular disease, blood vessels are constricted, so blood vessel constriction bad. Nitric oxide causes blood vessels to dilate, so nitric oxide good. An honest misunderstanding of physiology. Mostly in laboratory experience, the belief in the dogma that nitric oxide is a miraculous anti-aging molecule is reinforced when scientists observe its immediate vasodilatory effects. But as previously mentioned, blood vessel dilation isn't always a good thing. The idea is that if you increase the diameter of the blood vessels by increasing your nitric oxide, you're going to reverse brain aging by getting more blood circulating. It does help the brain to function by circulating more blood through it, but the problem is that nitric oxide at the same time is blocking the ability to use the oxygen. So it's imitating a shock state. In cirrhosis, for example, you get an exaggerated circulation of blood, which isn't being used because things are inhibiting the oxidative enzymes. Quote by Dr. Raymond Pete. The paradox of nitric oxide as a vasodilator is that as it causes blood vessels to widen, increasing oxygen transport to areas that were previously hypoxic. It also simultaneously inhibits the capacity of those cells to utilize oxygen. In the exact same way as cyanide or carbon monoxide, nitric oxide switches off oxygen use by irreversibly binding directly to the critical respiratory enzyme found within the mitochondria of cells called cytochrome C oxidase, CCO. CCO is one of the most important metabolic enzymes in the electron transport chain because it catalyzes the final step in oxidative phosphorylation and interacts directly with oxygen. The result of CCO inhibition by nitric oxide is reduced energy production by cells. Constricted blood vessels can undoubtedly be found in people with high blood pressure, and high blood pressure is a precondition for complications like a heart attack or stroke. But when blood vessels are constricted, more nitric oxide is in the answer. It turns out nitric oxide is the body's backup mechanism for dilating blood vessels during stress, and the body has its own much safer way to regulate this process. Carbon dioxide, the body's primary vasodilator, over the oxygen supply of the body, carbon dioxide spreads its protective wings. Quote by Professor Johannes Miescher, 1885. Contrary to what nitric oxide enthusiasts believe, the body's primary blood vessel dilator and relaxing factor is not nitric oxide, but another molecule which does the job far more safely and effectively, carbon dioxide. To put it into context, nitric oxide could be thought of as the body's emergency substitute vasodilator when carbon dioxide is not available. Students going into the healthcare field are almost universally taught that carbon dioxide is a waste product of cellular metabolism. But far from the waste product, CO2 or carbon dioxide is so essential for health that scientist Kyle Marmunis calls it the product of cellular metabolism. A high concentration of carbon dioxide in the body results in the maintenance of adequate blood supply, of adequate blood vessel dilation and relaxation. And CO2 is also directly responsible for shuttling oxygen into cells through a phenomenon called the Bohr effect. And one study, intentionally inhaled carbon dioxide was found to reverse pulmonary hypertension induced by oxygen deficiency. In other words, without adequate carbon dioxide, your body cannot use oxygen. Do people know that our health depends on the level of carbon dioxide in the body? Quote by Dr. Alina Vasiljeva and Dr. David Nias. One key to understanding carbon dioxide's soothing and calming effect physiologically is that following its production within the mitochondria of cells, it pulls calcium out of the cell and into the bloodstream along with it. The constant stream of carbon dioxide and removal of calcium from within cells helps balance blood pH and is essential for keeping the gears of your body's metabolism oiled and efficiently turning. Nitric oxide and carbon dioxide can both remove calcium from cells, but unlike CO2, nitric oxide can contribute directly to pathology through its toxicity and inhibitory effects on mitochondrial respiration. The nitric oxide hypothesis of aging. One of the most damning studies ever to combat the rolling tidal waves of misinformation regarding nitric oxide is called the nitric oxide hypothesis of aging. In the study, scientists from Louisiana State University suggest that nitric oxide is the primary driver of aging and causes damage to literally every organ in the body, particularly the brain and heart. At the Third International Symposium on the Neurobiology and Neuroendocrinology of Aging, I presented evidence to suggest that excessive production of the free radical nitric oxide in the central nervous system and its related glands, such as the pineal and anterior pituitary, may be the most important factor in aging of these structures. Evidence for this hypothesis has been accruing rapidly. Disease and aging are characterized by the breakdown of efficient cellular energy metabolism inside cells of the body. Nitric oxide's powerful suppressive effects on cellular metabolism explain why it's such a dominant promoter of tissue aging. Russian health researcher Georgy Dinkov describes the transition from health to disease and degeneration from the perspective of nitric oxide. Just like the stress hormones in the short term, NO or nitric oxide can be beneficial by preventing direct ischemia. But when elevated levels of these things become chronic, a general adaptation syndrome begins, a term Hans Sell coined. Then this biomarker of stress, which was supposed to only be raised short-term, becomes raised chronically. Then the body starts to adapt to it, and basically in a state of chronic hypoxia, the body says, nitric oxide isn't enough. What else should I do to increase blood flow? NO and lactate are the two most powerful stimulators of angiogenesis. The production of new blood vessels when you need a wound healed. Angiogenesis would be a good thing, but chronically, angiogenesis is one of the primary mechanisms behind the development and spread of cancer. If the nitric oxide hypothesis of aging is correct, reducing nitric oxide in the body is the most efficient target to halt aging and degeneration of tissues. Oh, and by the way, I thought now might be a good time to mention that the caffeine contained in coffee I spoke about at the beginning of this chapter inhibits nitric oxide. Modern medicine goes astray when it seeks to elevate NO levels until they're contributing directly to pathology. In fact, while the initial effect of nitric oxide may be vasodilation, nitric oxide in excess will quickly cause the opposite to occur, known as vasoconstriction. The following is a perfect yet tragic example to illustrate this important point. Viagra clinical trial kills 11 babies. Experimenting with Viagra on pregnant women is one of the most shocking and dangerous medical fiascos I've encountered in all my research. Why the fuck would anyone want to give a pregnant woman the erection drug Viagra? Turns out the practice of giving pregnant women the nitric oxide prodrug Viagra is surprisingly common and approved in most countries for use in an attempt to improve utero-placental blood flow, fetal growth, and meaningful infant outcomes. This is a classic example of scientists who have been taught to view nitric oxide as a vasodilator, thinking more is better. But the tragic result of a 2018 Dutch clinical trial that administered Viagra to pregnant women in an attempt to improve the growth rate of their fetuses have proven otherwise. CNN reports half of the 183 mothers in the trial had been treated with sildenafil, while the other half were treated with a placebo. At the time they were treated, the mothers did not know which treatment they were receiving, which is standard in clinical trials. 93 women were treated with the drug, and 90 were treated with the placebo or dummy pill. 19 babies born to the woman treated with the drug died, 11 of them due to the lung disorder. 6 babies were born with the lung disorder and survived. In comparison, 9 babies born to a woman treated with the placebo died, but none of them had the lung disorder. 3 babies with the lung disorder were born to women who were treated with the placebo, and they all survived. The hope was that the drug would open up some blood vessels in the placenta, according to Dr. Mohan Pami, and thereby help the growth of the fetus. But the Dutch researchers found instead that Viagra caused the babies to develop a blood vessel disease in the lungs and increased their risk of death after birth. The condition is essentially a type of high blood pressure in the lungs, wrote Deborah Goldschmidt and Michael Needleman in the article from CNN. The emphasis I added to the previous quote marks the incredible irony about administering nitric oxide as a vasodilator. Rather than dilating blood vessels which would lower blood pressure, the initial burst of emergency vasodilation caused by nitric oxide was quickly replaced by vasoconstriction and higher blood pressure, which ended up directly killing the babies. The Viagra used in the clinical trial was made by the pharmaceutical company Pfizer. Following the study, Pfizer spokeswoman Durvila Keene wrote in an email that the research was an investigator-initiated study and Pfizer have no involvement in the trial. Keene deflected all questions and responsibility to the scientists involved with the trial. Perhaps the most shocking and astounding thing about this story is that the use of Viagra on pregnant mothers continues to this day. You'd think that the tragic loss of 11 babies would persuade scientists to halt the use of Viagra on expectant mothers, not to mention question their beliefs about the physiological role of nitric oxide in the body. But instead of admitting nitric oxide is probably not the miracle molecule they've been told, researchers instead blame the death on an incorrect dose and continue their experimentation on pregnant mothers to this day. When will we ever learn? Seriously.